Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 38 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Ersman. As always, really grateful to be your host. It is September, football is back on TV, thank goodness, go Chiefs, and the weather's starting to get a little bit cooler, and this is the time of year that I really enjoy. So for you, if it's back to school season for you and your kids, whatever the fall looks like, I hope things are going well for you and your family. So today I am talking to Nancy Kauffmann. Nancy is the interim executive director of a really great organization called Dove's Nest. They kind of were birthed out of the Mennonite USA denomination, and their whole goal is to help churches deal with issues of safety, specifically for kids and youth. Their mission statement is to empower and equip faith communities to keep children and youth safe in their homes, churches, and communities. This is such an important topic. It's a little bit of a heavier conversation, so just a little bit of a warning about that. But as we say several times throughout this episode, church should be one of the safest places in our life, right? Kids, students, adults of all ages need to feel safe in churches. And unfortunately, there's still sin, bad things happen, and we as church leaders need to be prepared for how to handle those things. And so it is difficult. There's not an easy answer. There's not really a cookie cutter, one-size-fits-all solution for some of these things, but I just think that this is very important for churches and church leaders, specifically to think about, prepare for, and so I think Nancy has a lot of great information to share. We mentioned this a couple times throughout the episode, but I do encourage you to visit dovesnest.net, especially if your church doesn't have any kind of security policy in place at the moment. I encourage you to check that out. They've got a lot of great resources for churches. So without further ado, let's take a quick break to hear from a sponsor and get right to a really important conversation with Nancy Kauffmann from Dove's Nest.
What would it feel like for you to be living at your full potential? What if you were regularly connecting with someone who accepts you unconditionally, believes in and affirms your potential, actively listens to you, and keeps you accountable to help you reach your goals? A life coach will get you there. Coaching is an intentional one-on-one relationship that empowers people to realize their full potential in personal living and vocational accomplishment. Lead coaching is facilitated by trained MB coaches who serve as a life-on-life coach and is available to pastors, leaders, and anyone. To learn more, visit www.usmb.org/lead coaching or call Ed Boschman at 661-549-6021.
All right, my friends. Well, today we're talking about a very important topic. I'm excited to be joined by Nancy Kauffmann. Nancy is the interim executive director of Dove's Nest. We'll dive into what Dove's Nest does here in just a second, but Nancy has been in ministry for over 40 years. She's been a pastor, a conference minister. She's been involved at Dove's Nest since 2012. And so Nancy, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Real quick, can you tell us what is Dove's Nest?
Well, Dove's Nest, and actually I was involved in it since 2009, Dove's Nest is what at one of our conventions, there were a number of people who had interest in helping the church be proactive in providing safety for children and youth related to abuse. And so they gathered a group of us together. And then from that, and that was 2009. And from that group, then eventually Dove's Nest, formed, but we kept working during that time. So we are 12 years old, whatever. And our main focus, it is proactive. It is to help faith communities keep children and youth safe. And so we want, personally, I believe the church should be the safest place on earth, okay?
Yeah.
But we're human, and so we do all our little human things kind of thing too. But if we are believing in the Lord's Prayer, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, you are bringing your stuff in your hands before God to help shape things. And so yes, it was to be proactive in helping the congregations to be the best that they could be. That's the name, any mistakes we've made in the past or that kind of thing. But how can we make this a safe place? And so,
Yeah.
so we're constantly thinking of that.
Yep. I know you provide a lot of materials for churches. I was looking at your website, dovesnest.net, so I encourage people to go check it out. You got a lot of great resources on there. So is that kind of your main thing, is training congregations and church leaders, both proactively and, if there are issues, especially how to handle those things? Is that kind of your main goal?
We don't, yes. Oh, yes. We try to, a lot of our resources online are free, but then there's a number of them that we do charge a minimum fee. We are completely run by donations. We do not receive, sometimes we'll get grants here and there, but we're not run by any other organization. It's just people who have the heart for it. And so, but yeah, we do lots of consultations. I will be working on one later today where a conference is, asking questions about what do they do. We do not do investigations, but we can give you consultations on, if you're going to need to do an investigation, here are some things you need to think about and to find those resources. So we do push out to others who have the skills and gifts, to do that kind of thing. And
yeah, that's great. And you mentioned the conference. I just want to make sure you're for the Mennonite USA conference, right? That's what we're talking about today. So awesome. Well, so Nancy, unfortunately, abuse with kids and the youth, like you said, it's unfortunately prevalent. Like, we hear stories about it from the churches all the time. One thing I'm just curious about, why is this such a thing that you care about so much about? Why are you so passionate about it?
Well, I had been abused long ago. And I feel that, and I actually wrote a paper on it a long time ago for my doctoral ministry program. And I think because the church hasn't talked about it, like when I was younger, there was nothing. We had to just survive. Kind of. And so as I've looked over the years, I've seen people who, were victims and have remained victims all their lives. I've seen those who are survivors who do one of two things: grip as hard as they can, and boy, you bumped into me, so I'm going to protect my space here, and I'm angry survivor. And then there are ones who say, they're just trying to, okay, we want everything to be nice and and sweet. And I really think the church calls us, because God constantly talks about new beginnings, is that how do we become thrivers? And then also, because of my work within the church of working on policies for ministerial misconduct and ethical issues and things like that, the thing I like about this is it's being proactive. It's not beating anybody into the ground. Well, you did this. It's saying, okay, how can we improve? One thing I want to say is, and there's been some studies on that, people who have been abused by strangers can have a better possibility of recovery, healing, and hope than those who are abused by someone in the church. Because here you are, God loves me, but now God has allowed this to happen to me. Pastors or other people in the church will use scripture in a negative way to justify, what they're doing and that kind of thing. So then a child, God doesn't care about me. You can listen to some of the victims talk about, and survivors talk about their pain, not being believed or being shunned on something that they really had no control over, kind of thing, or just not talking to anybody and then holding it long. So, and the rate of abuse in the outside church world and the church world is the same.
Isn't that just so heartbreaking? We started this by saying that the church should be the safest place that any of us can go, and I totally agree with that. And I know, unfortunately, we live in a world where there's stories like Bill Hybels, and I'm thinking of Mark Driscoll. There's a lot of really high-profile leaders who have succumbed to various kinds of abuse. They're not all, sexual. Some of them are. Why do you think that is? Like, why hasn't the church been better at this?
Well, I think, for one thing, the reason it's so much in the church as it is in the outer world is because it's a sin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And even though we're being as proactive as we can here, we cannot eradicate that in the church.
Sure.
But eradicate this, the stupidity that the church has in either denying it, or we have a tendency to believe the accused over the victim complaint and bring in a complaint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then a lot of times these people have a lot of power. I mean, one of the church leaders in our group that I had admired, I thought was a wonderful person, had done so much around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns out he has all this, stuff behind. And finally, victims did come forward. But, it was what you find, like when you are dealing with, you've got a complaint and you're following an investigation, you get it from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard work, because you will get it from the side of, how dare you attack this wonderful person?
Mm-hmm.
And what this usually it's a female, what this female is really like, look at her behavior, you kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that, and then on the other side, some victims will say you're not doing enough, or, more of them are saying you're not doing enough in the church. And that's why you see some of the developments of some of the groups that try to address the church not facing it. And I just think, I think the church has always had a hard time with sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
a part of it, kind of thing that, that's hush hush. We don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, but sexuality is also about learning about healthy relationships, healthy boundaries. And if you can't talk about it in the church, then where are we supposed to get our information? It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be out there in society. And you know what they say about what men should be like, what they say about women should be like. And so anyway, and I think it's our fear, we don't want to be wrong, or this person had such a wonderful reputation. We don't want to be wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you bump up against this regularly, but I'm sure a lot of people listening would say, this would never happen in my church, or it's hard for me to believe that, like, kind of like what we've been saying, like this won't happen in the church. Of course not. We're different. Those are those big churches or whatever. When you hear some people say that kind of thing, how do you help them understand the importance of being proactive? Because being proactive is what you're all about. So how do you kind of get people to understand that?
Well, one thing is I can say, from all the years of working on the conference level and the denominational level, abuse happening in the churches disregards the size of the church, and even some of the closest, smallest churches can have some horrible secrets in there. And those secrets, a lot of people will be aware of, that there's some secrets in there, but nobody talks about it. And then that affects the church and how they can either grow or thrive as a church, because there's this stinky hidden secret that nobody wants to talk about or name. And I think whenever the church refuses to do that, I think, to say, you're kidding yourself if you say it's never happened in my church, or it would never happen in my church. Just think about the fact, okay, if you want to say that and you have a child, would you want to risk that child, your own child, your
Mm-hmm.
own grandchild,
Mm-hmm.
my own grandchild, to take that risk? Why not set up healthy, positive boundaries, and then know how we're going to deal with it if we do have a case, so that we don't re-traumatize the victim or other victims and survivors in the church. And I can guarantee you that even if you don't think you have a recent case, and maybe you don't, but you have probably got members in your church who have been victims
Mm-hmm.
so longer ago.
Yeah.
And so what does God say about that? And that's the theology. I think, to understand this isn't just a social issue. It is the church dealing with sin. This is church taking God seriously. What did God say in the prophets, about abusing the land and abusing people? What did Jesus say? And if you like, I'd give you a verses.
Sure,
One is, Matthew 9, but it's another, the Gospels, where Jesus says, let the children come unto me. So don't mock them. And in fact, one of the descriptions, Jesus has a little anger, a little sternness with the disciples who are trying to stop the children. And that's what we have. We want children to be seen and over here instead of holding them and embracing them in the community. Another one is Matthew 18:6. If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you drowned.
Yeah.
Or the one I like to think about is in Matthew 25:35-42, where Jesus talks about, when I was hungry, thirsty, a stranger in prison, you took care of me. And when the righteous ask, well, when did we do this to you, Jesus? Because they don't remember, he responds in verse 40, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me.
Yeah.
That
Yep.
speaks to myself.
Absolutely. Jesus just had this, deep compassion, deep love for children, which of course we need to continue. We're going to spend a little bit of time going through. I know you've done a seminar about 13 common mistakes that congregations make, and we'll get to that in just a second. But one thing that I've thought about is every church is different, right? Every church is a different size. They have different leaders. They have different people. They have different programs. Every church is different. And I know in the MB denomination, we have a few pretty large churches. We have a lot of small and kind of medium-sized churches where they're doing the best they can to have a kids or a youth program at all. Like they're, small church, they don't have a lot of resources, not a whole lot of volunteers. So I empathize a little bit with people who say, we can barely have any program. It's hard. That alone is hard enough. How can we possibly have security that's up to snuff? Like I could see how that'd be hard, just day-to-day life. Do you have any advice for churches of any size, really, but especially if they feel like they're kind of doing the best they can to have any programs at all? How can they up the security level a little bit? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, one thing I would want to tell, and I used to when I was working in conferences with a lot of congregations, is, even if you're a small congregation, if you're following and trying, to do your best, do not sell yourself short of what you can or can't do. And don't compare yourself to the big churches and what they can do. Okay, they've got all the money they need. But if God is calling you to this particular place and time, God will provide you what you need. So that I say. Second, I would want to say is that, okay, so you barely have enough, up to snuff, and, Dove's Nest could help you, but setting up foundational policies can help guide. And then I think, the idea of, you have to have a window in every room in order so that people, do. I mean, there are ways of working at that, or the number of adults that you need. I never think it's good to have just one adult with a bunch. Surely you have one other person who maybe they say, well, I don't have the skills to do this work with these kids. You do, but I will walk with you and be present and just be a body, kids to interact with and not be, the leader of it, that whatever. And for some people, sometimes some people will say, well, kids, they prefer working with younger people, and older people, they know a child is open to someone who truly is safe, who truly cares about the child.
Absolutely.
Is So don't write yourself off age-wise. Don't write yourself off size-wise. But just act, and there are all kinds of resources in your community. Find out what those are and get help that way. Use some of our free resources, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
that's good. That's good. Because even the big churches with all the fancy technology and all the right rooms and everything, they're some of the ones that have, it seems like, the most problems sometimes. So yeah, I'm with you that the size doesn't matter. That's really important. Okay, well, if it's okay with you, Nancy, I want to talk about some of the things that you lined out for the common mistakes that you see in congregation. So probably won't get through all 13 today, but why don't you walk us through? Let's just go. What's the number one thing that you see the churches mistakes they make that they need to work on?
One is waiting until a congregation actually has a case of abuse or harm, and then attempting to put a process in place to address it on the fly.
Yeah.
The second one I would say is, for a congregation to work alone, especially small congregation, but any congregation, I don't care how big you are. It's nice to have an outside group saying, and you can say to them, this is our policy as we are working this, help us, deal with that.
Yeah.
And one of the things about safety with children is be aware of, this isn't in the common mistakes list I had made, but be aware. I mean, you are a mandated reporter for child abuse. And if you're not, your congregation can get hurt by that, besides the fact that you've allowed the child to be even hurt more. And, we're calling everybody to be the best we can. So therefore, even perpetrators, do they want to really end up their legacy being a perpetrator, or can call them, to be something better?
Really quick, Nancy, I want to go back to the first thing real quick about the whole proactive policy. I think that's so important. Unfortunately, I think sometimes it is a little bit easier to make a policy after something's happened, because you have a specific thing that you can point to. Maybe something happened that you didn't see coming. Like there was a gap in your system that you didn't know about. So then you can write a policy. Can you talk about if a church listening doesn't have any kind of policy, like where do you start? Like what kind of policy should churches have?
Well, again, I would refer to some of our policies on there. They're done by other congregations, but I think one thing is a policy does need to be fluid.
Okay.
And so you can't say we wrote it back in 2015, and so it's good to go. I mean, there's all kinds of things that have happened. Social media, ways of texting of abusing persons and things like that. So it's got to be fluid. So, and as soon as you make a policy, there's going to seem to be an exception. Here we thought that we were going to do this, and this came in. We didn't expect this. Don't throw your policy out. Adjust it, kind of thing. But I'd say, basically, for the congregation to understand, we want to keep our children and youth safe. We want to be a good environment so that they can experience God and come, to God without, some of our negative agenda on there. I think the idea of where are the classrooms located for children, and you may have to make some switches, even if a small congregation say, well, we can't do this. I think, if all the Sunday school classes are in the basement and all the adults are upstairs, some other creative way. Think about the bathrooms, kind of thing. Is there a safe way for kids to get to the bathrooms without being, if you do have a perpetrator in your church to being, abused? I think, having some requirements that, one person shouldn't have this whole group of kids. There should be at least another set of eyes. I say educate on what are good, healthy boundaries for relating to children and to each other, kind of thing. And we do have a curriculum called Circle of Grace for Children that also, and find a way to empower children to understand, here's what we believe and value. So if you do have some issues, you can come and tell us, and we will, follow. I think, I don't know about your denomination, MBs, but in Mennonite Church USA, we've actually got a poster that names certain certain things about that kind of thing, and then it has at the bottom the congregation can write in who to contact if they have problems.
Okay.
But those are usually like in the bathroom, and put them low enough so children can see them, or brochures, put them in that place. Some churches, one church I'm going to be speaking at in a couple of weeks, they actually have a policy about their mission to keeping children safe, and they have it framed by the front door. So you walk in, you're new to this congregation. You see that, because perpetrators, they use what they think are the easiest places to get by. And sometimes it is a church, because we say, well, if somebody says, oh, this person did this, and if the perpetrator admits that the perpetrator said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I'll never do it again. And most likely they will do it again. So, or this idea that we forgive 70 times 7. Yes, we forgive 70 times 7. But that doesn't mean there are no consequences.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really glad you talked about that. So I think this might be one of your points, but about the whole forgiveness and kind of moving on, that's really difficult and touchy. And again, in the news, you hear about the kind of the big pastors who have fallen, and then people kind of want to protect them and they want to protect the legacy. You kind of hear that kind of thing all the time. I think that's one of your tips. Can you talk about that? If there is an issue, how do you deal with, especially if it's a high profile person, what do you do? What are the next steps?
Especially if it's a high profile person, all the more that you need to get some outside help to deal with this, because first of all, the congregation will be in high anxiety, and you got to make sure that, one of the common things that happens then when there's high anxiety, then people take sides.
Yeah.
And then you have your own fears, and you don't want to mess up, and you don't want to destroy this person's legacy and this stuff. But you got to remember, if that person has sinned, they are the ones that are affecting their legacy, not you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would say, get some outside help. I would also say, one thing about mandatory reporting, people say, wow, I didn't actually see it. I see these signs, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Well, you still need to do mandatory reporting. It's not your job to prove that it happened. You saw the signs, you saw the warning things, red flags. So you're reporting, and then the agency, social services or whoever's doing it, they're the ones that sort that out.
Okay.
I know perpetrators or, people who are accused may get angry at you for doing that to them, but wait a minute, you are trying to keep the whole congregation safe, including these children. And so the church is not for just this one person.
Right.
Or
right.
family. So, and then I think too that, one thing that we have developed is that if you do have somebody that wants to stay in a congregation who's been a sex offender or whatever, we've got policy put in place and understanding. We do trainings with accountability, because that is such a slippery one.
Yeah.
But you have to have a policy in place, and that individual has to have somebody with them all the time, even when they go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even when they go to the bathroom.
One thing I think you mentioned earlier, which again, it's touchy, and I just want to hear your opinion. I think you said something along the lines of perpetrators don't want that to be their identity. They don't want to be known as a abuser forever. And we also need to hold them accountable and protect ourselves. How do you handle that? What does forgiveness look like? Can you just talk about that a little bit? Just the messiness of we need to hold them accountable. They might need to have some consequences, and we want to love them. We want to forgive them. Can you talk about that a little bit?
First of all, if we're not the victim, how dare we forgive them? and sometimes we adults will say, oh, well, we forgive you. And then this child is sitting there going,
right.
And what does that say? What does that say to the child or to the, any older victim, youth victim, there can be kind of thing. And so I think just talking directly, I remember I had one, this was long before there was ever talk about putting policies in place. And I just told the individual, they denied it, that it even happened. But there were a lot of persons who said, as a child, I was abused by him. So one of the points was, okay, I couldn't prove it, but, he's no longer going to be allowed to teach Sunday school.
Sure.
And some people loved him, but I'm sorry, and what do you do? And so then the person said, and I says, look, you're claiming that you didn't do this. This then also protects you from any future.
That's good.
So you do that, but you name that this isn't about forgiving you. This is calling you to live into Christ's calling for your life. And do you really believe God called you to use? And I don't let up. I knew one congregation who was about 20 years ago. This guy had done some stuff, and then it sort of was forgotten. And then sudden there were more things coming up, new things coming up, and a number of these women, and it was with women, and a number of women didn't know that we had all this stuff with this guy earlier, that this church had with this guy earlier, and so then they end up being a victim. So you need to make the church aware, so that they can also be a part of being proactive and also protecting themselves. And sometimes, the family, I think you need to find ways of supporting the family without, and oftentimes a wife or spouse may realize that their spouse has done this, but suddenly they are, even though they may have been fighting before, they'll go like this. So it's together, them and the church. And then I also think about the children. So I often, one situation we did with the church was to talk about, okay, we now know this. One was the person was actually arrested. Okay. The church needs to know that. Don't do secrecy. Secrecy is for surprise parties. Okay. But then you name it, and then you tell the church, here's what we are doing. And if you have questions, here's where you come to in for questions. Just encourage them for discussing it in the parking lot or whatever, but let's bring it out to the whole. And then to say, our tendency may be, here's some of the common ways we may respond. We may think this wasn't fair to this person, or this wasn't, but we're looking for the health of the whole congregation and for the best for everybody, including the accused. And so gossip doesn't help, speculation doesn't help, but prayer does. If you feel the need to gossip or to be mean to someone because you don't like what they're doing, then get down on your knees and pray.
Definitely. Well, this has come up a little bit before too, but just like if people can't trust the church, then we can't do anything. If we've lost our trust, no one's gonna come on our doors anymore. So church has to have that element of trust. One thing, our time's going faster, Nancy, but one thing I want to hear you talk about too is how to talk to kids and youth about this, whether they've been abused or not. Do you open that conversation up with kids? Like, talk about that. How do you talk about this with kids and students?
Well, I have appreciated the Circle of Grace, and we didn't develop it. It was a Catholic group that developed it, but then they made more of a one for our group, for other than Catholic. And that talks about a safe place. And so talking about healthy relationships, I think, I think naming it. I mean, there's been various ways, through that curriculum. I knew at one time there had been a video called Little Bear, that was done with children. I don't know if you remember that. It was longer ago, but it was about a little bear, his mother, and this big bear who constantly wanted to feel him up. And little bear didn't know what to do with that. And finally, little bear is empowered to say, wait a minute, that's not right. And finally tell his mother, and his mother believes him. And so, it is dealt with. I think those way, even for, small kids, you don't have to be graphic, but you do have to be specific. One reason I think about the little bear is my son, I knew that they had it in school, and I had been, so I'm driving him home. He's sitting in the back, and I asked him, well, what happened in school today? And he tells me about little bear. And so I'm sort of waiting to hear what he's going to say. And then pretty soon he says, Mom, is the top of my head a private place? And can you imagine little kids, they get patted on the head, or they get, cheek rubs or that kind of thing. I said, because if you don't want people to touch that, they don't have a right to touch it.
Yeah.
And you can say it in ways. And I think with older, and especially with older teens, I think one of the things you'll find, young girls in church youth groups are even abused by a number of males in the youth group. That can happen.
Yeah.
So where do you talk about, healthy sexuality?
Yeah. Yeah.
What did God intend? Sexuality is beautiful. Intimacy is beautiful, but in appropriate, healthy ways.
Yeah.
And you don't abuse anybody. You don't take advantage of anybody. You don't use anybody for your own pleasures.
Yeah.
Are respectful of each other. So I think you can talk. And I used to work with youth. I used to bring in couples that I knew had long-term, very healthy relationships, and then allowed the kids to ask them any question. And it's amazing what people ask you. You got to be prepared, but on it, where can they ask in safety?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Man, Nancy, this is so important. Our time's wrapping up, but one more thing I want to make sure we get to. So I know I'm a male. A lot of a lot of leaders in churches are often males. I want to make sure that we do a better job of listening to women. And I know that is something that is so important, is listening, especially if the woman is a victim and the perpetrator is a male. There's kind of, I just want to make sure we say that clearly, that we need to listen to the people who have some kind of story, listen to the abused. I think that is so important. And if there's any lesson we've learned from some of the high profile cases, especially, it's if someone reports something, you need to take it seriously. Can you just tell us a little bit about that from your experience?
Well, first of all, there is very few false accusations made.
Yeah.
There are some, but it is such a minute. And you can guarantee that if a woman or child comes to you and says, or youth comes to you and says, this has happened, they have done a lot of internal struggle, fear, what's going to happen to me? If I say this, will I be believed? And sometimes the perpetrator or the accused, they will have already threatened, don't tell your parents or something bad's going to happen to them.
Yeah, right.
You got to help set up boundaries that give them a safe place to talk. And one of the things, don't expect, okay, well, this person's accused this I'll say male.
Sure.
So now we need to get them together. No.
Oh, yeah.
That has to be a separate thing, because you can be so intimidated by, here's the guy that has abused you so many times, and now you're sitting right across from him, and you are not sure if these people are believing you.
Yeah.
You're just really afraid to do anything. Kind of thing. So I'd say, well, listen, if it's even still online, remember that Dr. Nassar, for the gymnastics doctor.
Oh, yes. I can't remember his name, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
anyway, at one point then after the trial or during the trial, they let all the women come up and say, and if you listen to that, you do not hear women, vindictive, or you didn't hear women, you heard the soul cry out telling their story.
Right.
And I actually cried most of the time thinking about what those women had gone through right in front of their parents.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking. And we started this lesson with it too, that the church should be the safest place, right? There needs to be caring adults who are ready to listen and be safe places for kids and youth especially, but adults too, right?
Yeah.
We all need trusted people that we can talk to and wrestle with life, just the things that we're all going through. That the church, of course, should be the safest place to do those things. And that's why this is so, so important.
Well, even our work, we have discovered that not only are we talking to helping with children and youth in congregations, but former victims, former survivors who finally see the church doing something proactive and starting to make a few contributions, to that, which is nice. But for them to realize no more, well, some maybe have to go through the pain that they went through.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, Nancy, I wish we could go a lot longer. We've got a lot more we could talk about. I want to make sure people listening, go to dovesnest.net. Like we said, there's a lot of free resources there. I'm sure if people have other questions, Nancy, are they able to get in touch with you?
Yes. There's places there to contact me, and we go from there. And I try to respond as soon as I can on that. So yes. Yeah, we're here. We want to see the best for the church.
Awesome. Well, you've done great. You've so much help already today. Is there anything else you want to make sure we talk about today? Any closing thoughts?
Oh, I have so many. I think you did pick up the thing about, trust your gut.
Okay.
Sometimes sure what's going on. Trust your gut. There must be something that God's stirring inside of you to say, you better look at this situation.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. So anyway.
Yeah, that's really important. Well, Nancy, this is so important. Thank you for dedicating so much of your life to this. It's a very important cause. I'm grateful for you and for Dove's Nest. So thank you for the great work you're doing. Listeners, please go check out the website and check out all they have to offer. Lots of good stuff there. So Nancy, thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me.
Have you visited the USMB website lately? At www.usmb.org, you'll find information about upcoming events, a complete list of MB churches across the U.S., information about lead coaching, lead one, lead cohorts, and lead pods, Mennonite Brethren history, and a resource library with recommended books, articles, and videos, including recordings of all USMB-sponsored webinars. Visit www.usmb.org for your connection to everything MB.
Well, once again, I want to give my thanks to Nancy and all the team at Dove's Nest for the really great, important work that they're doing. These issues, when we talk about safety and abuse, they're touchy, they're difficult to talk about, there aren't easy answers. But man, especially in today's culture, today's day and age, the church needs to be having those conversations. And I'm just grateful people like Nancy and places like Dove's Nest exist to help us out and navigate those tough waters. So again, if your church doesn't have any kind of security policy, I highly encourage you to check that out. It's better to be prepared ahead of time than to have to do damage control on the other end without any policies. So I encourage you to get on that. And we'll actually be talking about security a little bit more in future episodes. So I encourage you to keep listening, as this topic will probably come back here shortly. I've said this several times, but one of my favorite things about this podcast is that we get to have conversations like this that may not happen elsewhere. And so part of being a church leader, especially in today's world, is just being prepared for issues like this. And so again, I want to thank you so much for listening. Thank you for helping us keep this thing going week after week. Really grateful for all of you who choose to listen on a regular basis. Again, I'd love your help spreading the word, especially if this is a topic, an issue that you're passionate about, or you know that churches in your area might need some help with. Love your help spreading the word. So thanks again to Nancy. Thanks again to all of you listening today. Really grateful for all of you. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you again here next time, right here on the Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.